Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out this afternoon for this briefing on Hurricane Laura. We have a full crew with you today that can answer questions. I can tell you, speaking to you later today will be Benjamin Schott. Ben, as you all know, is from the National Weather Service, but also scheduled to brief you today will be Secretary of Transportation, Dr. Sean Wilson. And of course, we got the rest of the team here today, and we want to thank the State Police and Colonel Reeves for hosting us for these press conferences. As everyone should know right now, and this graphic was just updated at 4 p.m., but Hurricane Laura is forecasted and on track to be a mid-level Category 3 hurricane at landfall. This is a major hurricane. It's going to be a large, powerful storm, and it is forecasted to make landfall on the Louisiana-Texas line at about 1 a.m. on Thursday morning. There haven't been any significant changes to its track over the course of the day. There was a very slight movement towards the east, which obviously every mile that it comes to the east, that means that the severe impacts get pushed into Louisiana even further. Parts of Louisiana will begin seeing impacts from the storm at some point tomorrow morning with tropical storm force winds, and then obviously throughout the day that will increase. Just from a historical perspective, Laura is shaping up to look a lot like Rita did 15 years ago in terms of its forecasted intensity and the forecasted spot where it will make landfall in southwest Louisiana. And again, we don't say that to scare anybody, but that point of reference sometimes helps in order to make sure people understand the seriousness of the situation and that they take the necessary precautions and take advantage of the time that we've been given to prepare. This is one of the blessings in this particular scenario, because there was a time not long ago when we were afraid that Hurricane Marco would come and we would have a very brief window to respond to Marco and then try to reset before Laura, but we actually have a better opportunity to do that now. We need to take full advantage. All of coastal Louisiana should brace for storm surge, and this is going to be a significant amount of storm surge, and from the Texas line to Morgan City is where that's going to be most pronounced, and Ben's going to get more into that in just a moment. And earlier we thought that storm surge was going to be the major impact, and it still will be, but the wind less so. But with this being a strong Category 3, the impact from the wind is going to be much more pronounced than we thought, and will extend across more of Louisiana than we originally thought, because it's a very powerful storm, and hurricane force winds are forecasted to continue all the way up just about to Shreveport. I'm not sure the last time that we saw that. Hurricane warnings are in effect, as you know, for most of southwest Louisiana, and the winds will be strong. I'm going to let Ben get into that in just a moment. But just to give you an idea, from Baton Rouge to west of Houston, there will be very strong winds associated with this particular storm. Do want to encourage people before Ben briefs not to get too fixated on the cone, because there will be impacts, severe impacts outside the cone, and also because the storm historically will make landfall only 2/3 of the time within the cone. Just understand what the forecast is, and that this is a serious storm that's going to have impacts much broader than the cone itself. The rainfall will be significant as well, and the good thing we have going for us is the forward speed of the storm that's forecasted when it hits Louisiana, and how quickly it should travel and exit into Arkansas. But that doesn't mean that we won't have significant rain, and understand that when the rivers can't flow because the storm surge is holding them up. It doesn't take a whole lot of rain for those rivers to continue to swell and have that localized flooding that you wouldn't want to see. And even with a quick moving storm, sometimes rain bands can sort of, in isolation of the storm, seem to be stationary. And if that stationary band parks itself over a given area, then much more rain will fall in that area. And as you're going to hear, that could be up to 15 inches in certain places. That's the very high level. The meteorological expert is going to come up, Ben, and give you a more detailed briefing. On the backside of that briefing, I'll come back and give you some more comments, and then bring up Dr. Sean Wilson. So, Ben, if you will.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you. I am Benjamin Schott, the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service office in New Orleans, and we are here to discuss the impacts of Hurricane Laura that will make landfall sometime early morning on Thursday. As you can see at the track here on the screen, right now we are dealing with a hurricane that sits in the middle of the Gulf, a very warm Gulf of Mexico with above normal sea surface temperatures, and little to impede its development over the course of the next 24 to 30 hours. There's no real wind shear for it to even hamper its development until maybe right as it approaches the Louisiana coast, but by then it would be probably a little bit too late to actually diminish its strength with it already becoming onshore at that time frame. When it does reach shore, right now is forecasted to have winds of 115 miles per hour with gusts approaching 140 miles per hour. With its speed right now, at the time, coming on shore at about 15 to 20 miles per hour, it will quickly work its way inland, and those strong winds will do most likely devastating to catastrophic damage inland, maybe even 20, 30, 50 miles in. A great recent example of a major hurricane doing this was Hurricane Michael in 2018, as it came into the Florida Panhandle and worked its way and did destructive damage in a huge swath all the way into Georgia. Now that hurricane was a Cat 5, granted, but this will still have a very similar effect going well inland with very destructive winds. On top of that, the wind field, as the governor mentioned, will be quite large, and it's possible there can be even tropical storm force winds felt as far east as the Atchafalaya and in the Baton Rouge area. It's right on the edge of where we could see the easterly extent of tropical storm winds. Hurricane force winds will probably make it in at least as far as Alexandria, and maybe, as the governor mentioned, as close to Shreveport before it fully becomes a tropical storm and moves into the state of Arkansas. With that, I'd like to kind of move on to maybe the next slide, if that's at all possible, and just talk about some of the key takeaways from this storm. Some of them have already kind of been mentioned, but I'd like to kind of hit on some of the specifics when it comes to the storm surge. As the governor mentioned, it's going to be again, life-threatening, if not straight down catastrophic for southeast Louisiana, with 9 to 13 feet of storm surge at the coast. It's possible that this storm surge can move in well far inland and even up rivers up to 30 miles. So there's going to be a significant amount of the southwestern portions of the state that are going to be heavily impacted by this. And so with that, any interests along the coast need to take this very seriously. This storm surge will also be seen along the entire Louisiana coast, with surge even at a level that could create life-threatening conditions even as far east as Morgan City, and there'll even be effects not just on the west bank of the Mississippi River, but also wrapped around southeast Louisiana into the east bank, and as well as part of the tidal lakes there. That's how large the wind field and strong this storm is. With that threat already mentioned of the wind and the surge, there's also the heavy rainfall. And as the governor mentioned, 5 to 10 inches of rain will be quite common over portions of southwestern Louisiana. If you get under those heavy rain bands, quick flash flooding can occur. Anyone trying to attempt to travel during this storm is putting their life at risk, and anyone in that vehicle at risk. You do not know how deep that water is. You do not know how fast that water is moving across the road, and you don't even know if the roadway is still there, depending on even whether it's day or night. So travel during this, whether it be from the wind threat, the surge threat, or the heavy rainfall threat, is highly discouraged. The National Weather Service recommends that everybody follows all local officials' decrees. And, the window for this, as the governor mentioned, is closing. It's short. We do have a little bit more time between now and tomorrow morning, maybe to lunchtime tomorrow. Any preparations that need to be done will probably have to be wrapped up at that time because, as he had mentioned, tropical storm force winds will be possible on the coast. And then things will be obviously degrading rapidly as we move through the day tomorrow and as we approach landfall of Laura on Thursday morning. With that, I'll turn it back over to the governor, and thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and appreciate you being with us for several days now, and appreciate the work that you're doing. I did want to get to some mandatory evacuations. They are in place now for all of Cameron Parish, all of Calcasieu Parish, east and west bank of Plaquemines Parish, in Lafourche, it's Golden Meadow and south of the Leon-Ontario floodgate. In Jefferson Parish, there are mandatory evacuations for Grand Isle, Barataria, Crown Point, Jean Lafitte, Lower Lafitte. And in Terrebonne Parish, it is south of Zone 1 that's under a mandatory evacuation. There are also numerous voluntary evacuations in place around coastal Louisiana. So it is incredibly important that everybody stay tuned in to the local news, to the local officials, and heed whatever directions that you are given. It's critically important information that's going to be coming from them, not just with respect to evacuations, but with respect to a lot of information that you're going to need to know. Obviously, as we have mentioned, because of the COVID public health emergency, our sheltering plan looks different than it does in most storms. And by the way, with respect to COVID, today we added 717 new cases on more than 21,500 tests. Ultimately, sadly, we also had 33 additional deaths reported today, and we had a slight decrease in the number of people that were hospitalized. But the point of me saying all that is there's still obviously a lot of COVID in Louisiana. We still have a case growth rate that exceeds what we would like, and in fact is categorized as red for the entire state. So that has impacted the way we're going to be sheltering. So for the first time, we're focused on pre-landfall non-congregant sheltering in order to try to keep families as safe as possible from both the virus and the storm. The good news is that FEMA approved the use of hotels and motels in the place of congregant shelters, and we're incredibly appreciative of that. We have booked hundreds of rooms across Louisiana and have been transporting individuals and families to those rooms throughout the course of the day. We anticipate that may continue into tomorrow as well. Earlier today, we announced that all state offices will be closed tomorrow and also again on Thursday. I did want to mention that we got word today that the president signed off on the entire Category B assistance that we had requested for those parishes that were originally approved for partial Category B. We now have them all, and basically that's the southern half of the state. I'm not going to read the long list of parishes, but we appreciate him doing that. And of course, we're working with North Louisiana parishes right now because they're getting their emergency declarations filed because we now know that this storm is going to impact them as well, especially in northwestern Louisiana. I'm going to ask Dr. Sean Wilson to come up now and give you an update from DOTD's perspective, and then I'll be back to finish up and take your questions.
Thank you, Governor, and good evening. Since the beginning of this incident and this event, DOTD has prepared and has been staffing all of its DOTD districts with their high water signs and barricades and cones and other tools that we use to ensure that your roads are safe. The biggest news today I could share with you is that we've received our declaration from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration waiving the hours of service for commercial drivers involved in responding to this disaster. And that involves everything from shipments of food, fuel, generators, other supplies that are necessary, and many of the utility companies that you see working as well can now travel longer hours. It's also important to note that this will help our state in its recovery effort because we will maintain this posture until we have vacated the current disaster. Yesterday, I signed a declaration to change the weight limitations, which will also allow those commercial vehicles to carry more supplies and materials to deliver to different communities around the state, and they can go up to 88,000 pounds. All of the enforcement agencies and our partners that work in weight enforcement and vehicle regulations are going to be adhering to those guidelines. Earlier this week, late last week, we suspended the tolls on the Lafourche Bridge as well as the Cameron Ferry, and seeing as though Cameron is really the first place where this event, Laura, is going to come ashore, all of the residents should know that that ferry is no longer operational. We have moved it to safe harbor at the Port of Lake Charles, and so please plan for your commute and your evacuation and leave as early as possible. Regarding evacuations, we've secured 20 coaches that have been on the ground here in Louisiana. We've got an additional 25, as well as a total of 40 school buses that we are sharing with Louisiana National Guard to help in evacuation. You should know that COVID, as the governor said, is still very present, so we have instituted a way to sanitize all of the buses after their initial use and in between uses with groups. And you should also be prepared to see fewer people on buses so that we can keep you spaced as much as possible. If you don't have a mask when you arrive, we will provide one for you, and we would also ask you to social distance as much as possible, and you may be seated with your immediate family and folks that you came to the shelters with. If you're evacuating, I'd like to stress to you to be patient. We do not need accidents as folks are evacuating. We have made decisions and taken precaution to close down all of the construction projects to ensure that you have at least 2 lanes of traffic on the interstate, and that's going to be in the case until we repopulate the communities that are evacuating. Please remember to put your seatbelt on, don't drive impaired, and look for opportunities for uncertain conditions. As you heard from the National Weather Service, a foot of water can float a vehicle. 2 feet of water can take you away in a float. And in 2019, we had 10 fatalities, 10 crashes with 13 fatalities because folks were driving through high water. Since 2009 to 2018, it's been an average of 95 deaths a year in the United States with folks driving through high water. So please take that very seriously in your evacuation efforts. Remember to use 511la.org. It's a program that will allow you to see roads that are closed, as well as where we have standing water on the highway so that you can map your route as you leave. And then finally, I will let you know that we will have our Motor Assist Patrol will continue to operate for 24 hours a day for individuals whose vehicles may be stopped or have to have a spare tire or run out of fuel. So that will always be there. Remember, please don't panic. Be prepared and be safe, and look for folks out there who are trying to keep our citizens safe. So thank you, Governor.
Okay, to begin to wrap up, this is obviously a very serious, strong, big storm system that's going to come onshore in southwest Louisiana about 1 a.m. on Thursday. By about noon tomorrow, people in southwest Louisiana need to be where they intend to ride this storm out, and they need to be postured accordingly with their families. It's important that nobody lets their guard down. And every revised forecast the changes are just very, very slight. And so the confidence level of the National Weather Service in this track is pretty high. In the forecasted strength is very high. And so people should just understand that this is going to be a serious storm, and we need to be prepared. And again, don't be so focused on the cone, because it's a very large storm to begin with, and it could very easily wobble just a little bit. It came back slightly to the east tonight at 6. And again, every time that happens, and that's just more of Louisiana that's going to experience the brunt of it, because as you all know, the strongest side of the storm is the eastern side, or the right side, because of that counterclockwise flow. And it's not just the strongest on its winds, but on the storm surge as well. And as luck would have it, this storm is scheduled to, forecasted I should say, to make landfall at 1 a.m. on Thursday morning in southwest Louisiana. That happens to be the highest tide of the month, is 1 a.m. Thursday morning in southwest Louisiana. If you haven't already done so, please visit getagameplan.org. It can help you to make sure that you are as prepared as you can be. But there are also contacts for every parish office of emergency preparedness. So if you have questions, if you have a transportation need, if you need to figure out where shelters are or collection points or whatever, you can go there, get the contact information, and then call your office of emergency preparedness. You can also text LA.gov to 67283. LA.gov to 67283 for updates from my office. So finally, this is a serious situation that demands our full attention, our most careful preparation, and our most earnest prayers. So at this time, I am going to take your questions, and then again, remember, you can ask questions of anyone up here. Sam?
Yeah, Governor, there are at least several hundred people in Cameron and Calcasieu parishes who have active coronavirus infections. They've all been told to leave. So I'm wondering, can you talk more about what the specific protocols are for handling people who need help, who need access to hotels and transportation, but who have an active coronavirus infection? Do you have quarantine wings in these hotels? Do you have ways to ship these people in their own buses? Or how are you handling those people?
Well, Sam, you ask a good question, and for those of you who couldn't hear it, it's about evacuating people and sheltering people who are from Cameron and Calcasieu who may be positive. And the reason that question is so appropriate is because that's the area of the state with the highest positivity right now. But the fact of the matter is somewhere between 25 and 40%, and with a study done in Baton Rouge by Oxner and Pennington at the end of July, perhaps as much as 60% of the state's population that has COVID is going to be asymptomatic. So we need to treat every individual out there, not just those who are symptomatic or those with a positive test result. Every individual needs to be treated as if they have COVID. And we need to have proper regard for them by protecting them from ourselves in the event that we have COVID, which is why everybody here is wearing masks today. And that's exactly why we're focused on non-congregant sheltering. If people can, we're asking them to move north in their own automobiles to a place of safety and secure hotel and motel rooms. If they need to, they can shelter with other family. But if they do that, and obviously they're not staying with people who are from their immediate household, they really do need to engage in the maximum social distancing that they can. Wearing their masks and washing their hands frequently. All that's incredibly important. And then on our sheltering plan, congregant shelters will be a last resort. But even there, we are not going to have the capacity we would normally have, because we're going to be trying to cohort family units so that they have separation between themselves and other individuals that we're going to shelter. We're going to make sure we have PPE, hand sanitizer. We're going to have those CDC recommended precautions and mitigation measures in place there, but we still don't want to do that if it's possible to get those individuals into non-congregant shelters first, which is the focus. That's what we've been working on today, and as I indicated, that work will likely continue tomorrow as well. And for any individuals out there who have questions about the sheltering plan in their area, again, you need to contact your Office of Emergency Preparedness and ask those questions. If you've got transportation needs, you need to make that known. You do that by contacting your OEP, and you can find the contact information at getagameplan.org. Critically important. General Wascom, did you want to add anything to that?
No, sir, you covered it.
All right.
You covered it well.
Marquita? Yes, ma'am.
Governor, Healthy Parish officials issued a mandatory evacuation order, but they said at their latest briefing that it doesn't seem like most people are appreciating that. Do you have concerns about people staying put in that parish in particular? Obviously,
Yeah.
cameras are different.
Yeah, and obviously we do have concerns with people not evacuating if they're told to do so. Obviously, you have low-lying areas in certain parishes and that flood when you have events like this, and you have some areas that don't. And residents typically know what to expect. One of the concerns that I have, quite frankly, is that not so much that the people haven't evacuated, it's that they haven't evacuated yet. They wake up tomorrow, get a fresh look at the newest forecast coming out of the National Weather Service, and decide, oh, well, it's going to come in on land at 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. This will be what they're saying tomorrow on Wednesday. It's going to come in on land 1 o'clock on Thursday morning. Let me start to evacuate now. Let me tell you why that's a challenge. If they need assistance with transportation, we're prepared to provide that. But once the winds get to a certain level, you can't use those coaches and those buses anymore. That could happen tomorrow as early as 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so my biggest fear is not so much that people aren't evacuating, it's that they're going to decide to do that tomorrow when it's going to be too late to move them, for example, out of Calcasieu Parish. And so we're working with the local officials. We're messaging as best we can to try to make sure that this happens. And look, we also know that a lot of people are self-sufficient, and because they haven't chosen to evacuate yet doesn't mean that they won't. And most people do own their own transportation, and so I would hope that they will do that tomorrow, especially if they know that they live in one of those areas that's prone to flooding. But if you listened to Ben a while ago, if we're going to have 11 feet of storm surge, for example, that goes as many as 30 miles inland and so forth, and then with the heavy rainfall, then we're going to have significant flooding in places that don't ordinarily see it. Again, I would just remind people that the storm that this most resembles in terms of intensity and the place of landfall is Hurricane Rita from 15 years ago. Greg.
A lot of the evacuation destinations might be in Alabama or Central Louisiana or now or hurricane force against the region there. Does that affect that plan in any way?
Yeah, well, the hurricane force winds, once they move inland, will be getting smaller and smaller in terms of the diameter of the storm, and it's going to go up the state line for the most part. So I don't really worry so much about Alexandria, but you should know we're also bringing individuals into Baton Rouge, which is incredibly important. And in fact, Baton Rouge is the destination of choice. Right now, we continue to find other places in the capital region and away from that Louisiana-Texas line, because that storm path, as you can see, goes straight up the line. And so if you get just a little bit further to the east, we think that's the safest place to shelter people in state. And for those people who are making their own decisions about where they're going to go and look for a hotel or a motel room or potentially stay with family, you need to be looking at this as well. It'll tell you where to go and where not to. For example, you probably ought not be going to the Leesville area or the Mansfield area and into Shreveport, but get further east and you'll be much safer. Yes, sir.
Governor, I know we're in the setup here, but when the storm hits, with the aftermath, everything going after that, is Louisiana prepared to deal with that and how?
Yes. Well, it looks like we've done it plenty of times before. I had a call today with Pete Gaynor, the FEMA administrator, and he talks about how good the team is in Louisiana in terms of preparing for and responding to natural disasters. And they are very, very good. You're looking at the best in the country. And it's because they're really good, dedicated public servants, but it's also because we get more practice than just about anybody else in the country. So our response, our recovery is going to look like it does for other storms. It will be a little more difficult because of the COVID environment, but all of the essentials stay the same. You should know that we've already had discussions with Pete Gaynor, the administrator I just mentioned, Tony Robinson, the administrator out of FEMA Region 6, that were discussed in the White House today, leaning forward on recovery, whether it's commodity distribution, how we're going to do damage assessments in a COVID environment, and we'll get into much of this later, virtual damage assessments. Suffice it to say for now that we've already started looking at the recovery, started coordinating all of that with local officials, but also with FEMA and other federal partners. I had a conversation today with the HUD Secretary, Dr. Carson, for example, and we were talking about this. But I don't want people to be focused on the recovery right now. We still have a period of time that we need to spend on trying to position ourselves in the best possible way before this storm makes landfall at 1 a.m. on Thursday morning. And so the focus has to be between now and about noon tomorrow is everybody needs to do what needs to be done so that so that they and their family are positioned when and how they want to be when this storm comes on shore. The weather is going to degrade pretty quickly after lunch tomorrow in coastal Louisiana, particularly southwest Louisiana. And so that's the timeline we're working on. Yes, sir.
Are there any plans in place to assist nursing homes, maybe evacuate facilities?
And I want to apologize because I heard nursing homes. I didn't hear anything else.
Are there any plans in place to assist nursing homes, maybe evacuate?
Yes. Well, yes, there are. And so we've been assisting nursing homes for a good while now in a lot of different ways related to the COVID environment and testing and sanitation and sending in teams to help manage the situation. I can tell you a number of nursing homes have already evacuated today, some to Kilgore, Texas. Others are still in the process of evacuating. I will tell you, it's always a very difficult decision to make as to whether you evacuate a nursing home because you have residents who are very frail, and sometimes the move itself can be very problematic. And you're talking about a patient population that for months has been sort of in lockdown without visitation and so forth. But there are a number, principally in the Calcasieu Parish area, that have decided to evacuate. We have assisted them. They typically all have partnership agreements with nursing homes in other areas. And by the way, just so you know, Kilgore, Texas is not right across the line where they would be in danger, but it's actually much further north. In fact, it's out west of Shreveport. So we are working with the Nursing Home Association and with individual nursing homes to evacuate them upon request. Yes, sir.
Governor, obviously we had one hurricane that did fizzle out earlier this week.
Yeah.
The general from that weather service said we could see strong winds 20, 30, 40 miles inland. So in your professional opinion, how big of a gamble is it to hold that water?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be praying that Laura is as weak as she can be and has as little impact on our state as possible. But we're going to be preparing for exactly what been forecasted. Look, that was a very unusual event with Marco and how it disintegrated in a way that had really not been forecasted. The worst part of it seemed to get severed off and went into the panhandle of Florida. The rest of it just sort of disappeared. I don't think we should count on that happening again. What we should do is prepare for the worst. And by the way, there's good reason to do that based on the forecast and the impacts that we're expecting. And having said that, I always ask people to pray for the best, and we should continue to do that as well. A couple more questions, Melinda?
So your phase 2 order is expiring in a few days, and I obviously realize there are other things going
Yeah.
on right now, but have you made a decision about what you're planning to do with
Yeah, so the question is about the current proclamation on the public health emergency dealing with COVID-19 that expires on Friday. I am aware it expires on Friday. We have had meetings with my public health team and others both yesterday and today. I will be making an announcement tomorrow. This is a very difficult situation as it relates to COVID for a lot of reasons. I mentioned that the highest positivity anywhere in the state of Louisiana happens to be in Region 4, which is focused around the Lake Charles, Cameron Parish area, and that's where we have the most people who are going to be evacuating and sheltering elsewhere in the state. But it's also true that we don't have the testing going on this week so that we can keep our eyes on what's happening, especially that early indicator of test positivity. And we know that this is happening at a very, very bad time for us because, as we've mentioned many, many times, it takes about 2 weeks from a change in behavior to whether that shows up for good or for ill in the test numbers. Well, we're not going to have the testing to show us what happened when our schools went back into session a couple of weeks ago. And not just our schools, but our higher education campuses, too, that have been bringing students on campus for the last couple of weeks. And the reason I say that this is very difficult is if you look at K through 12 and higher education, not just the students, but staff and faculty, that's 25% of our state's population. And there's been more activity, more contact among that 25% of our state's population than at any time since March. And so for all of those reasons and many, many more, we're really looking at this hard, trying to figure out what the right thing to do, not just in terms of the proclamation that comes out Friday, but how long to put that proclamation in place before it would expire. So we're working through all that. I will have an announcement for you all tomorrow. I do want to thank the people of Louisiana because the most recent reports have all been improved in terms of the number of cases and positivity. But it is still true that the state of Louisiana as a whole has more new cases over the last 7 days, more than 100 cases per 100,000 population, so that the state as a whole remains red. About half of our parishes remain red for their positivity as well. And so it's a challenging time for us, and we want to make sure the decision is the correct one and that it gets communicated correctly, and we'll do that tomorrow. One more question, unless you're questioned out. Look, I want to thank y'all for continuing to cover this. I'm going to ask the people of Louisiana one more time, please take this storm very seriously. The further south you live and the further southwest you are, the stronger the impact. But for those people in central and north Louisiana, especially on the west side of our state, I don't know the last time you've seen a storm come ashore that is going to basically have hurricane force winds associated with it until it exits Louisiana, which will be about 12 to 14 hours after it makes landfall at 1 o'clock on Thursday morning. So we've got a little bit of time left to get ready for this storm. Please do that. Please contact your local officials if you have questions. Let's make sure that we're good neighbors. Remember, this is a COVID environment, not just a natural disaster related to the hurricane. And then let's make sure we lift everybody up in prayer. Now, tomorrow, we're going to change up a little bit. We're not going to plan to have a 6 p.m. press conference. I think we're going to plan to have one around the 11:30 to noon time frame because, quite frankly, we don't expect, based on what we've been told, that once we get that forecast update tomorrow morning, we don't have any reason to believe it's going to change very much, and we want to get that as much information out as early as possible before landfall at 1 o'clock on Thursday morning. So tomorrow's press conference will be scheduled for the 11:30 time frame. Without one later, unless there is a significant change that we don't expect, or there's some other development that we need to make sure that people are aware of. So with that, we will see you at 11:30 tomorrow. And thank you.